Well, Christopher Ruocchio has done it again. And when I say he's done it again, I think he's actually done his best work so far in the Sun Eater series with Demon in White. Now, if you've watched my previous review talking about Empire of Silence and Howling Dark, you will know that I am a fan of both books. I would say, I think it's fair to say, Howling Dark being, I think, much better and a great book, and especially a great half of a book. I think the second half of that book is spectacular. And Demon in White, I will say, is almost perfect. And at this point, I don't know if I need it to be perfect, because it does everything I wanted it to do and so much more. Now, I knew pretty early on that I was going to love this book. The first chapter of this really blew me away in terms of setting the world and the stakes of what's to come and what has changed for Hadrian Marlowe, his crew, and the rest of the universe and the rest of the Empire. And so I think this book does such a brilliant job of, one, bouncing around between genres, but also providing different types of stories. This is really 4 or 5 different books in one. And now that could seem, I could see how you could hear that and be like, well, then it's not really one story. It's multiple stories. It's not an anthology. It's not a collection of stories per se, but it is so tight in the way that its narrative is structured. You have a couple of these different arcs. It feels like almost a fantastic season of television with this show, or with this book. Each section sort of wraps up in a really satisfying way, like so much so that there are portions of this book, there are arcs of this book that would be better than a lot of endings of other books. Like, if you were to say probably like the midway point of this was the end of the book, you'd be like, yeah, that's how you want to end it. It can't get any better than this. There's no possible way that it does, but it continues to get better and better as you read. Now, I would say, I think the last 100 pages or so, the last sort of last stand battle that you expect to come from these large sci-fi space operas, I think that's actually probably the worst part of this book. It's good. It's really well done. But what is revealed beforehand is so mind-blowing and is so different from everything that we've been provided from in either Empire of Silence or Howling Dark, that I found myself craving more of those moments, more of the mind-bending, weird, just sort of out of left field stuff than I did the epic battle scenes, which is often and typically what I look forward to in a lot of these kinds of books. But I think something has shifted in Demon in White for the Sun Eater series, where, yes, you're going to get your big battles, you're going to get all of those awesome hero moments for epic scenes and things like that. But it is really these smaller, more intimate moments that feel so grandiose and huge. And I think whenever I look back at Star Wars is a franchise that used to mean a whole lot to me. I was never the biggest nerd when it comes to the lore of Star Wars, but as I've gotten older, I've always been a little bit more interested in the larger universe building and sort of this idea of who Anakin Skywalker is, or Luke Skywalker, and this sort of chosen one trope that you get in a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. And the last, I don't know, in the last couple of years of Star Wars has not been very good. And I actually am not the biggest fans of the prequels. I'm old enough to remember when those came out, and I always think that the second book or second movie was that Attack of the Clones. That movie was the first time I realized movies could be bad. And I know that those movies now in hindsight, a lot of people love them and a lot of people have a lot of affection for them. And they are also pretty brilliant in terms of building that universe and adding more to it. But for me, I think the wild thing is when we look at the rest of the Star Wars materials, whether it be the new trilogy or the TV shows that have come out, I would actually exclude the games from this because I think the Jedi Survivor games or whatever are actually pretty darn good. But all the new Star Wars stuff just lacks depth in its world building and its lore building and the excitement that you get from learning and unraveling things about characters and seeing characters grow from one thing into another. The journey that we go on with Hadrian Marlowe in Demon in White feels like the promise of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, or Luke Skywalker appearing to be sort of the chosen one in that trilogy. I mean, I'm not saying that Hadrian Marlowe goes full-blown villain in this, but what we see here is we see the effects of what has happened to Hadrian at this point and how it's starting to affect the world and how the world sees him and how people in the world see him. And I think a brilliant thing with Demon in White, the first two books, Empire Silence, Howling Dark, this isn't to say that Hadrian doesn't have agency and that Hadrian isn't responsible for things that happen in those books. He's making choices, he's making decisions, and things are being affected by those choices and decisions. But with Demon in White, I think this is really the first time in the series so far that things aren't just happening to him, but he's actually making decisions of how the world is going to react or bend to either his will or his desires, or sort of. I think the best way for me to put this is up until this point, and probably a certain point in this book, Hadrian Marlowe is a pawn. He is a piece that is being played. And in Demon in White, we get to see Hadrian not be a pawn. We get to see him actually sort of get to make decisions and things that matter. And we see that, no, he's here to play this game and he's a force to be reckoned with. And that to me is such an exciting place to be. This is the third book of 7. So we're kind of close to the halfway point in terms of this series. But Hadrian now, from where he came from in the first book, is so different. And the amount of growth that we see in his character is just phenomenal. It's phenomenal work. And I adore this book. There's so much to really kind of say, almost too much to say without giving away spoilers. But I think Hadrian is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters I've ever read. This is quickly becoming my favorite fictional universe. Another random thing I wanted to say was, in terms of the genre bending stuff, I think it's so brilliant to see Christopher Rocchio take so many different inspirations and use them really well. There are things in here where obviously you're expecting your Star Wars Dune-esque space opera, but I love the Alien or Predator-esque sort of horror elements that are in this. I think it's really successful. There is some grotesque stuff in this book that works really well. And this really does feel like the most mature of the 3 books that are in the series thus far, for which I've read. And it makes sense. The first 2 books are really, as Hadrian would say, it's like, hey, I was a child in these, even though he's a full-blown adult in those books. You know, we're talking about a really old guy here. And so we're starting to see his maturity happen in Demon in White, and seeing that develop over time over this book has been stellar. And it's almost hard to separate the 3 books now. I think this book does a really good job of making the Empire of Silence mean a lot more. I think it pulls stuff from the first book in a way that is ultimately really satisfying, as well as important to his development. And so it's hard to actually just view this book in a vacuum of itself. Like it's part of a series. And so this is the turning point. I said that last video about Howling Dark. But we're constantly seeing this growth, and it's blowing me away to a point where we're nearing the end of the year, and I really want to make sure that on January 1st I can start a new book. And so I'm trying to figure out where and when to stop reading this and read some smaller books, so that way I can start a new book on the 1st. But at this point, this book has been so good, I just don't care anymore. I just want to continue reading this series. It is a absolute powerhouse of a book. There was one point when I picked up this book to read it the other day, and I couldn't believe how far I had gotten into the book. So much of it had just flown by, and I couldn't even believe at what rate at which I read this. And that's not saying I'm reading fast. I'm just saying this book just doesn't stop. I said when reading Howling Dark that those last 300-ish pages are my favorite consecutive 300 plus pages I've ever read. And this pretty much continues that momentum almost the entire way through. I think it starts out fantastic. I think there's a little bit of a lull, but once it gets going, it pretty much doesn't stop from there. And once again, with the sort of structure of the book, there are little moments to breathe. It's not just like, this isn't one big action sequence. That's not what's happening here, which it could have very easily done that. It could have been from big moment to big moment to big moment, but it gives you time to breathe with intimate moments between the characters. And once again, those are the things I have found myself to care most about. And I'm excited to see where those relationships go, where Hadrian goes as a character. I will say probably around chapter 66, close to that 60-ish to 70-ish mark in this book, I began to sort of dread the end of the series. It was one of those things where I was sitting there and I was like, I kind of regret making this one of the first sci-fi or larger series that I've read since Harry Potter as a kid, because I'm loving this so much. I am adoring this series, this franchise, and the fact that I only have 4 mainline books left is a bit of a bummer. It's a bit of a bummer because I'm loving this so much, as well as I'm afraid this book might, in this franchise, in this series, might ruin other sci-fis and other series for me because it's just that good. It's incredible. So if you haven't picked up Sun Eater, I will say 100% by the middle of Howling Dark, by the middle of that second book, if you're not hooked, I don't know what to tell you. I think that this series probably isn't for you. But if you get to this third book and you have a similar reaction as I do to this book, you're going to love this series. And I say that with full confidence, having not finished the series. This book alone makes the other 2 books worth reading. If this becomes a point in where you stop, and in a way, I think all of these books have so far ended in a way that says, hey, if this is where you want to stop, that's okay. And this could be your stopping point, but I have no idea how in the world it could be once you get through this. But let me know what you think about Demon in White. Have you read the Sun Eater series? Have you made it this far? What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. But for now, I'll talk to you later.